From the darkest corners of the creepy old house down the street to the screams in the night. Settle in, ParaFamily, to join with Whitney and Brandon for another spooky episode of the Paraunity Podcast.
And good evening. Welcome, ParaFamily. This is Whitney, flying solo tonight. Yay me! But I suppose it's only fair, considering I have not been around for the last two episodes. Brandon is fine. He sends his love. We'll just hope and pray he gets better real soon. And thank you all for all the support and kind words from when I was absent. I promise you, I'm fine. I'm alive. Just with more gray hairs and stuff like that. Yeah, welcome to my world. Anyway, so tonight we're going to have an amazing guest on. It's a gentleman that I have met. I think I've known him for about maybe 2 or 3 years, and he's become a really important part of my life, and I can't wait for you all to meet him. Couple of quick things too. Remember that after this is Thanksgiving week for those of us in the United States. So happy harvest, happy in how many ways you celebrate it. And may you be surrounded by bounty. May you be surrounded with friends and family and good food and however else you celebrate. So chat is open tonight. Come on in if you want to ask questions of our guest. We're happy to have everybody on. So on that, my good friends, let's go ahead and get started with this part of the show. So tonight we're going to welcome a gentleman by the name of Sam Baltrusis. He is a medium. He is a book author and a historian, and this man literally wrote the books on many aspects of haunted Massachusetts. For those of you who may remember, my first episode of the Paraunity Podcast was on the Bridgewater Triangle. Boy, did I crack a huge nut on that one, but who knows, maybe Sam might have some things to say about it. So Sam lives and works in Somerville, Massachusetts, which is considered part of the greater Boston area. It's northwest of Boston and north of Cambridge in Middlesex County. As of the 2020 United States Census, the population is 81,045. It's a very ethnically diverse place. And what I read on the city's website is in Somerville Public Schools, more than 50 languages are spoken. So that's pretty cool. It's also close to Tufts University. And Somerville was named the best run city in Massachusetts by the Boston Globe in 2006. And it earned the All-American City Award in 1972, 2009, and 2015. That's pretty awesome. I actually have never heard of the All-American City Award, so this might be something to learn more about at some point. So Somerville was actually established as a town in 1842 when it separated from Charlestown. However, European settlers have been in the area since 1629. And I read somewhere that some of the guys from Salem actually came down to Somerville, or to the area that would be known as Somerville. In 1639, the colonists officially received the deed of the land from a native woman. And my apologies. I am aware that the title she's known under is actually considered offensive, but right now it is the only way we know her. She is known as a Squaw Sachem of Mystic. That is not her real name. Her given name is actually unknown, but we do know that she was the widow of Nanapashemet, who was the Sachem or leader of the Pawtucket Confederation. And I hope to learn more about her at some point. So if I get more information, I'll put that in the show notes. I want to fast forward to the American Revolution because this definitely was a hot spot for the American Revolution. On September 1st, 1774, 260 British regulars secretly traveled up the Mystic River under the cover of darkness, maybe, and marched to the old Powder House, which is still standing in Somerville today. And it stored the largest supply of gunpowder in Massachusetts. Now, for those of you who know about the American Revolution, what happens next is something that happened in various colonies, including my own in Virginia, throughout the years. The British took the gunpowder and made way with it. They brought it to Castle Island, which is the location of current Fort, I believe Fort Independence, I believe is what it was. That action, of course, of removing the gunpowder triggered responses, protests, mob responses from the American Patriots in Massachusetts. Same thing happened down in Virginia, just in 1775. That was a fun time. 7 months after this gunpowder incident in Massachusetts, the battles of Lexington and Concord took place. Some historians view the gunpowder theft of Somerville to be the quote-unquote dress rehearsal for the battles of Lexington and Concord. And I know I just did broad strokes on that. There is so much about the battles of Lexington and Concord and everything that led up to it, including mention of William Dawes and Paul Revere and the midnight rides of not just those two, but so many others. So forgive me if I'm sacrificing the nuances of that, but I'll put some information in the show notes about it. Needless to say, because of this location of Somerville, it definitely saw a lot going on from the American Revolution. And I believe also George Washington put something there too. I can't remember what it was. God, I feel so bad. I ought to shoot myself for how bad I'm doing with American Revolution history right now. Shame on you, Whitney. In any case, after the American Revolution, Somerville continued to grow thanks to the opening of the Middlesex Canal in 1803. And in 1835, Somerville also became a stop on the Boston and Lowell Railroad. So that's definitely bringing some things going on. Now, one real interesting thing I learned about Somerville today is that outside of the city, outside New York City, it has more artists per capita than any other U.S. city. And the Somerville Arts Council hosts a weekend-long festival called Art Beat. And I know that's something that Sam might speak to as well, because he is in his own way an artist, as most writers are. All right. So while Somerville is actually pretty light on hauntings that I could find, I can talk about, there is one place that actually came on TV one time, on TV's Ghost Hunters. There is a place called Sacco's Bullhaven. It was owned by the Sacco family since 1939, and it was said to be haunted by a former employee. One of the if you know a bowling alley, the mechanical ball return would work when it wasn't supposed to. However, Taps, during the TV show, investigated the location and was able to debunk the ball return activity. But who knows what else could be going on? I think that's kind of cool that there might be a former employee there at a bowling alley. I like bowling alleys. I just don't like the shoes, but that's just me. I also do know that when we talk about haunted cities, Boston is definitely up there. And Sam Baltrusis literally wrote the book on the ghosts of Boston. He also wrote the book on the ghosts of Cambridge. He wrote the book on ghosts of the American Revolution. But what's really passionate for him is writing and sharing these stories and these experiences with everybody, and also looking into basically how emotion, such as fear, joy, how that also contributes to our attitudes and what we experience in hauntings as well. So I am actually very happy to welcome to the show my good friend, and I hope you really enjoy him, my friends. ParaFamily, let's welcome Sam Baltrusis to the show. Good evening, Sam. How are you?
Hey, doing well. So when you were doing the discussion on Somerville, I was like looking at my book to
How did I do?
You did pretty well. So just to fill everybody in, so Sacco's now is called Flatbread. So it's still a candlepin bowling alley, which people are like, what's that? It's just basically smaller pins.
Mm-hmm.
It's still haunted. I mean, I've actually, it's in my book, Ghosts to Boston. And then I've also, I kind of gave an update in my book, Ghosts of the American Revolution, because Somerville does have a lot of American Revolutionary War history.
It's got a lot.
Which is, we touched on that too. And also the Native American backstory. I live right on the Mystic River. So I live in a place called Assembly Row, and you can feel the Native American energy right around the Mystic River. So I'm glad you mentioned that because I do feel that what's going on beneath the surface is definitely Native American in spirit, and I think that if you just walking by the Mystic, you can just feel it, and you can feel the ancestors, and you can just feel the energy, and also the spirit energy as well. I think there's a lot of Native American energy in my neighborhood.
Oh, yeah. And I actually have heard you mention your neighborhood several times when I've attended classes with you. And in fact, a friend of ours actually lives not too far. Can you tell me a little bit about why it's called Assembly Row?
So Assembly Row is fairly new. So I lived in Davis Square. Actually, my first apartment was right by the Powder House, which you talked about in the intro, in Ball Square. So I've lived throughout different parts of Somerville over the years. It's definitely gentrified. The part where I live in Assembly Row was where there was a Ford plant, and so it was not a good location. There was a mall here that they tore down, and now it's apartments, and it's sort of like a community of shops and artisans. I live on Artisan Way, which is a hat tip to creators, and so I think that what's the energy here and where I live, it's sort of like, I wouldn't say it's an artist colony, it's not, but it has that vibe to it. So Assembly Row is named after the Ford manufacturing company that was here years ago, but the other things were assembled here too. I'm just not really sure what.
I mean, I've lost track of how many things might have been put together in Richmond. I know cigarettes. I know distilleries. I know all sorts of stuff. It's crazy. It's crazy. But let's talk about how you were put together, Sam Baltrusis.
How was Sam Baltrusis assembled?
Oh, yes. How are you? So basically, okay, now, full disclosure, Sam has been on TV shows such as A Haunting, and he's also one of his big roles. I say roles, but this is actually a cool story. When you were doing The Curse of Lizzie Borden on the Shock Doc series. So I myself have heard about bits and pieces of how you got into the paranormal, but let's strip it all the way back. Were you always interested in the paranormal?
No, I mean, I was terrified of the paranormal. I mean, like I grew up as a kid who had gifts, and I actually grew up in Florida. So I went to college here in the 90s. I lived in New York City for about 10 years and then moved back in 2007. So I've always been interested in the history, but not necessarily interested in the paranormal.
Right.
So a lot of the locations that I write about now were of interest. I mean, I specialize in the Salem witch trials, and when you kind of did my list of books, the book that I'm known for is Ghosts of Salem, and also Wicked Salem too. So I've given tours in Salem, given tours in Boston, given tours in Cambridge. But back when I first started, when I was a child, I would interact with my grandfather, and this is after he passed, and I remember having that experience and telling my mother, and my mother was like, "Sam, that's your granddaddy," and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, really?" Because I'm having this conversation with this man that's like sitting on the corner of my bed. It turns out where I was sleeping was where my grandfather used to sleep because we actually moved back to Florida after my parents' divorce. So fast forward to a couple years after that, it started to get dark for me as a child. I started having visitations with what I can only describe as this shadow figure that was in my window with red glowing eyes. And that shut me down completely.
And you don't have to talk any more about that one. You don't have to mention that one anymore.
Thank you.
I know what happens when you talk about that one.
Yeah, so just to fill everybody in, when I do talk about it, things shut down. So we're not going to go there. But that did. I put on paranormal blinders for many years. I was a journalist for about almost 25 years, and I still consider myself a journalist because what I do as an author is really journalism, and I'm just not always interviewing people. I'm also interviewing ghosts as well. So I kind of flipped the script. So I wrote an article back in 2000, in the early 2007, 2000. I was a freelance writer from 2007, 2009,
right.
And I was a pretty successful entertainment journalist. So I would write about all the made in Massachusetts films. So like Mystic River and
yes.
So like The Departed and Good Will Hunting. So I would write about the locations and the actors and actresses that were filming here, and that was a huge success. But I was also not fulfilled, and I had an assignment to write about haunted hotspots in Boston. And so when I write an article and when I write a book, I immerse myself in the topic. So I want to get every aspect of it before I actually start writing the article or the book. So I started giving ghost tours in Boston, and that was in 2011, 2012. And that turned into my first book called Ghost of Boston. And I write about Somerville because I was living there at the time, and I continue to write about Somerville because other things kind of pop up along the way, like the American Revolutionary War history, like just my experiences. I worked at a spirit Halloween store, and we had a haunting there in Somerville. So I do feel that it's important to kind of showcase where you live, but it's also, I'm surrounded by history. So Salem is seriously really close to me, and I'm able to commute. You said that I live and work. I actually work in Beverly, Massachusetts.
Beverly. Yep, that's right.
That's literally, I chose Beverly, and it's Endicott College where I work at, a lovely inn that's on the campus. But I chose to work there because it's right outside of Salem, so I'm accessible to Salem, but not accessible to a stalker. I have a ghost stalker in Salem, so we're not going to talk about. But but Beverly, I love the history, and actually, it turns out I kind of go to locations. I'm almost called to these locations, and Beverly has. And this is after doing some research called Witches Woods, and Witches Woods is an urban legend that may or may not be true, but the legend is that in 1692, the innocent men and women who were accused of witchcraft, probably by my distant cousin Ann Putnam Jr., hid in those woods, and that's what the legend has been. But what we didn't know is where those woods were. So I've been really working tirelessly with the local historical society to kind of pinpoint where the woods are, and it turns out that the woods are actually right by my work. So I knew there was something there. But those kinds of like little gems that you uncover, historical gems that because people, when I mention Witches Woods, and they're like, what? I've never heard of that. And it's been a legend that's come up in my books, and people have talked about it in past periodicals. And to be able to pinpoint the location, and also to pinpoint the location that's next to where I work, is pretty cool. So I love doing that. I also love using my abilities to kind of use my intuition to help guide me where I need to go next. And I've always done that, even before I identified as a clairvoyant and the medium. But it's definitely more powerful now, and I use that intuition not only to sort of like kind of like go back and get the history correct. And there's a lot of misinformation, and it's my passion really to untangle the myths and misconceptions, especially with the Salem witch trials, but with other historical locations that I'm called to, and to tell the truth as much as we can. And as when you also are a historian too, you know how difficult it is to get to the truth. And I think a lot of it has been glossed over. So you have like sort of the what people want you to remember and what really happened are two different things. And I think both of our passions is to give a voice to those who don't have a voice. And a lot of times I will hear those voices as a medium and hopefully tell their story correctly.
Beautiful. Yes. And definitely that is such a huge passion with me, not just as a historian, but also as an educator, because it's just, I have to be committed to sharing this with kids and making sure that they see all the different nuances and all the different layers of history. I want to go back to, you mentioned a lot of stuff about hidden gems. What would you say is a hidden haunted gem in some of your travels?
Oh, so the thing is, I've traveled all over the country. Especially this past year. This past year has been the year before was the year of fear, where I traveled all over and visited the most haunted locations that I would ever go to. Hidden gems that anywhere that has a historical, like sort of like a history that I can dig deeper to find the truth. And just locations, I'm trying to think of a good Salem is a great example. You have like the surface of what's really going, like what you think Salem is, and people will do a Google search. You're like, oh, I know everything from my Google search. Actually, if you dig deeper, there's so much more to it. And I think that that's the biggest problem, especially in the internet age, is people rely on Google as their source, and a lot of it's outdated. And you have to really not only do the interview people, give tours, immerse yourself in the location, but you have to go through old newspaper clippings. And I highly recommend newspapers.com for research. And I teach a class, and when you've been a part of that group called Ghostwriters, and our group really is to talk about the process of writing and also the process of research too, because research really is extremely important, and to go beyond just doing a Google search. But hidden gems, I would say, for like Sleepy Hollow. So I'm writing a book called Ghosts of Sleepy Hollow, and it's very similar to Salem. In fact, I'm doing a chapter comparing Salem, which is a Halloween destination year round, pretty much, and how it compares to Sleepy Hollow. And both have their sort of like their eminent authors that lived there. Nathaniel Hawthorne in Salem, and Washington Irving, who created the legend of Sleepy Hollow, and what is now called Sleepy Hollow. Back in the 1800s, it was known as North Tarrytown. So, so I would say Sleepy Hollow is a hidden gem for me now. I think that there are, I'm heading to a location that I haven't been to is the Hanover Tavern in your neck of the woods. And I'm actually, you're going to the Paracon coming up in January, and I just found that I'm going to go as well. Yay. So we'll be able to hang out in person. Yes. And I'm excited about that location because there's a lot of history there.
Oh, I'm not going to tell you anything.
I love that. I love going and using my senses to sort of figure out what's going on, and hopefully be validated for what I'm picking up on.
There's a lot of cool things at Hanover Tavern, and to kind of touch base on that is a really cool event. We'll definitely plug it at the end of the show because we're both going to be there. I'm vending, and I'm going to be on a panel, so go me.
Awesome.
Yeah. What I love about taking the class with you, the Ghostwriters class, is how you were able to talk. You put so much emphasis on the research. And I really do believe that that's something that people forget about when it comes to writing, any kind of book. So let's talk about how you're able to pull in, let's face it, a very practical side when it comes to journalism, because when you are a journalist, you're focusing on a deadline. You have a goal that you're trying to get to when you're doing a journalist. How does that compare with writing a book or anything like that?
Well, so when I first wrote my book, Goes to Boston, and my publisher, so I wrote the article, which I spent a lot of time on writing that one article. So imagine just the amount of energy I put into writing Haunted Hotspots. It was for a local magazine called Stuff. That's no longer. So the publisher said, Sam, we want a book on Boston, and we want it in about 3 months. So I had to write my first book at a really, really tight deadline. The good news is I was already started the research for the article, so that really helped me. I view my books as a series of articles. So if you approach it like several articles, and I was writing thousands of words per week as a journalist, but before I started writing books. So it wasn't that hard for me to kind of make the transition. But what the transition was more mental, was the mental block. Looking at, because what an article was very a no-brainer for me. I was able to do it pretty easily. But to view it as sections and not as an entire book, the idea of a 60,000 word book was just overwhelming to me. But I took it one day at a time, and one chapter at a time. So I just focused on each chapter, and I ended up, my deadline was so tight for the first book, I wrote 1,000 words a day, and that was my goal. And if I didn't write 1,000 words a day, I didn't beat myself up, but I tried to compensate the following day because I had to do it to meet my deadline. So since then, I've really been, I'm like, you know what, I will never do that again. But I'm glad I had that experience because it was able to prep me for, I'm now 17 books in. So going through it, I spend years doing the research before even considering pitching the book now, because now that I know that if they like it, they're gonna snap it up. So
may as well do the research
before you pitch. Make sure you're prepared. And luckily, I was for my first book, Goes to Boston, but it does translate very well. I think that my writing style is definitely more journalistic. It's more, like, I would say chatty, but chatty in a sense that people can kind of comprehend what's going on. And I think my what I'm really good at is taking something that's very complex and making it understandable. And I think that's what you have to do as a journalist, and that's a skill that I learned as a journalist. But I also have the ethics that you have to have, and you don't really see that anymore as much anymore. Like with journalism, I think a lot of journalism is clickbaiting and trying to get people to look at your article online. I come from the print world, so in the print world, my first job was at Newsweek, as I was a researcher at Newsweek, and you had to go through libraries of information to fact check articles. You didn't have the internet to kind of type in something to check it. So my first job was research, and it's a skill that I love. I love libraries. I can spend days, weeks in libraries, but I also have embraced new technology too, because it really makes it a lot easier. So I'm a hybrid, but I'm in a school before you even consider pitching a book to do the research and be prepared, because if they do snap it up, you need to be ready.
Exactly. Yes. And I promise you, I've been doing lots of research.
Good.
Probably a little too much, but that's beside the point. We actually have had quite a few authors on our show. We've had, before I came on, Brandon, actually, my co-host, actually spoke with Lloyd Auerbach.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
We've had one of our favorite guests, one of our friends of the show, is Betsy Kulikowski, fiction writer. She writes the Veritas Codex series, which is basically amazing. If you like shows like Destination Truth, you're probably going to like the Veritas Codex. And we've had Richard Moschella on the show, who's a great historian. I think you two have a great deal in common with
we're friends. We're friends. Yeah.
Yeah, you know Richard.
We've done events together. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've had him on the show. We've had just some really cool, not just fiction, and also nonfiction. Do you have any fiction books? I actually am not sure if you do. Yeah,
so because I'm a journalist, it's hard for me to write fiction. So no, I don't. I tried writing fiction. I have, but it's not something. It's something that I kind of do on the side because really, it's a similar skill set. But I'm a little wary. I would love to write something that's based on historical fact, like sort of like historical nonfiction, or I don't know what do you call it, Wendy, when it's sort of like it's taking fictional but setting. I mean, it's taking nonfiction, but but putting historical fiction. Okay,
yeah.
I like The Alienist or the Devil in the White City. I love those books. So if I do write a fictional book, it will definitely be kind of like based on actual history.
That's my challenge.
It's something that I have considered, but I do know like my readership. There's a certain readership that they want the truth, and what I'm known for is finding those historical gems like we talked about earlier, like finding those hidden things at locations that people didn't know. And really my books are history books with ghost stories, and the paranormal is definitely a part of that. And I kind of view my mediumship and the shows that I do like really everything I do is about history. And so like my underlying passion is history, and also to shine a light on locations that may be overlooked by history.
I like that too. So let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned the Year of Fear from last year. And I do know this because you've told me this before. And I've read this in your book, Fueled by Fear. The scream heard round the world. When Sam says that he gets scared very easily, he does get scared very easily. That is the truth. But I want to talk so following up on that, what kind of purpose do you think fear serves when it comes to the paranormal or in our own lives? What can fear teach us?
Well, I mean, for me, it was years and years of having pretty terrifying experiences, and being legitimately afraid. So as when I first started in the paranormal, like investigating, going to locations, I didn't have any problems. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. But I did have that memory from my childhood of the situation. So that was always kind of lingering. Like, is it going to happen again? And yes, it did eventually happen again. It wasn't until I got an attachment in like 2016 after I gave a lecture right out at Topsfield, right outside of Salem, about Richard Crowninshield, and I ended up channeling and didn't know that I was doing that and not pushing it out. And so after that, I was terrified again. Like everything I did. So I really don't easily scare. I'm sort of like, I'm one of those people that kind of go in calm, high vibration. So I was in a very, very high vibration when I first started in the paranormal, but it kind of beat me down to a lower vibration, to the point where I was drained. I was sort of like emotionally tapped. And that's when the darker energies kind of go after you. So for me, it's really important not to be afraid and not to go in, because the darker energies feed off of your energy. So if you're extreme emotion, so I feel extreme emotion feeds the darker energies. So it's really important to me to go in and not to have that extreme emotion, because they love that. They feed off of that, and it's taken me years and years to realize that. But I was giving a lot of these darker energies a lot of my personal energy, and so it's important for me to go in and not to go in afraid, and kind of go in with the idea that I'm protected, and also to really adhere, because I was not protecting myself. And our mutual friend Dana, who was a high priestess witch, she protected me. Really, we've done a lot of investigations together, and we actually did a show called Forbidden History together, where she does the crystal shield of protection, and it's something that I use a lot in my day-to-day life. And I think that crystal shield really does make things easier for me. But my year of fear was going to these locations that I swore I would never go to. And so one of the locations was the Sally House in Kansas. And actually, this is the 1 year anniversary of that visit, by the way. So I was looking at...
Really?
Yeah, so it's interesting that so this time last year I was with Richard Estep and my Jessica Potter was with us and Christy Ayers as well, and so we all three we did the McAteer Villa, and then we went to Sally House. So I go in with this newfound, like, okay, I'm not going to go in afraid. And I also, and you said not like it's important for us not to know if you're going to go in as a medium. It's important not to dig through the history because you don't want to be you don't want to go in influenced by what other people have written or other people experience. So I didn't know anything about the Sally House except for I knew it terrified me. And people that I really respect in the paranormal have told me that they had the one place that terrified them the most. John Zaffis. We talked about the Sally House years ago, and he said that, Sam, that's the one place that that I don't know if I would ever go back to. And if John Zaffis has issues with the Sally House, so do I. So
poor John.
Yeah, and he's seen it all, and if he's had experience there, then I knew I was going to. But I went in, so I go in with Richard, and he and I go in first. And when I walk in, it felt like what felt like kind of like the alien, like something that just kind of goes right on my face when I walk in, like it was kind of smothering me. And I was doing the crystal shield of protection right outside of the door walking in. And then I didn't have any, I really was shutting myself down. Like I was kind of blocking myself throughout the whole experience. I go upstairs and I kept hyperventilating. Every time I went upstairs, I would like start panicking and hyperventilating. And Richard was really concerned because I kept going upstairs. Long story short, I did actually successfully spend time there. I also it was important for me not to sleep there because I really felt like whatever was there was trying to attack me. And the whole story, now that I know, there was the Pickman family lived there, and the story is that there's a little girl who basically had a botched surgery in the house, and it's so not true.
It's not. But even the Pickmans have said that that's not true.
And so it's not true, but the activity does mimic that though. And
it's interesting.
And so is that a thought form? What is it? Like what's going on there? So I can validate that there is definitely activity going on there. But what is it? That's the thing. Like some people think that there's the downstairs area, and I kept dreaming symbols and sort of like seeing symbols like in my dreams. And I do feel like that there was something ritualistic that was done there, conjured something. But whether or not it's the D word, or if it's something else, like if it's like a thought form or even an elemental. And so my whole book, Fueled by Fear, is really about not giving these negative energies your energy, but also looking at the possibility that a lot of things that have been labeled as demonic are actually not demonic. There are sort of misunderstood elemental energies or misunderstood thought forms. And Sally, I think is a thought form. I think it's a tulpa, an egregore. I think it's been created, manifested somehow by giving this entity energy. And she doesn't like men. And some people are attacked more than others. And I was definitely under attack not sure by what, but I was attacked by something.
It's a strange location. Are you familiar with the Astonishing Legends podcast?
I'm not, but I'm sure I may have listened to it and not realized.
It's good. I mean, it's good. It's thick. But they did like a 4-part series on the Sally House, with the history and everything. And one of them had a very pretty terrifying experience there, captured an EVP and can't even explain it. And it's a pretty terrifying sounding EVP. I'll send you the link sometime, but it's an interesting
thing. Or maybe
you're definitely not the only one.
and when I was there, people were like, "Oh, I've been there, nothing happened." And I think I think certain people that are sensitive, and myself and you too, Whitney, I think that like when we go to certain locations, it's almost like the trauma is triggered, and they go after us. They see that vulnerability, and they go after people like myself or people that are sensitive. And so Sally House to me was pretty profound. The other locations were the Hinsdale House in New York, which I swore I would never do, and then also the Conjuring House in Rhode Island. So I was able to conquer my fear. What's interesting, the Conjuring House, out of all three of them, was the one that terrified me the most. And actually, that was the one location where I felt the safest.
You felt, from what I read in your book, you've indicated a great deal of, there was a feeling of peace in some aspects.
It was beautiful. And, I'm good friends with Andrea Perrin, who was one of the...
She's amazing.
I love her. And she was one of the original family members of the Perrin family that were part of what happened in the 1970s. So she has a history there. She told me, she wrote a book called House of Darkness,
House of Light. That's a good book. It's like a 3-volume.
It's a 3-volume book, and also I knew going in that Bathsheba has been demonized by history, and she is not how she's portrayed in The Conjuring. And in fact, I read a whole chapter on that, and I had it in Fueled by Fear, but also in my book Mass Murders. Right. So it's important for me. It was important for me to, I guess, to exonerate Bathsheba, and also to look at it with with new, fresh eyes, and not with a history going in with the idea. Because I have seen the Conjuring movie, but I also realize that the Conjuring movie is based on it's Hollywood, and it's based on Hollywood's take on what really happened there. Do I think that Bathsheba actually has been a spirit in the house? I do, but she doesn't belong there. Like, she's not. It's not her house, and
it's not even her property.
And so I think what's really going on there is Native American elemental energy, and I feel the same about the Hinsdale House too. I think the Hinsdale House, they did a house exorcism, they called it, but it's more like a house deliverance, and that was the Dandy House, and now it's basically it's run by Daniel Klass, and he does a really wonderful job at that. But there's a lot of history. To me, it's the woods, and same with the Conjuring House. It's not the house per se.
It's the land.
It's the land. Yeah. And so the two houses that I would say that I loved. Hinsdale House was a little terrifying. I did spend the night there with Richard Estep and my good friend Sarah Streamer and Aaron. We had a crew of researchers there. And I will say that I had to sleep downstairs on the couch. I didn't sleep upstairs because it was too creepy for me.
Fair enough. We'll forgive you.
Like, getting to the scream heard around the world. Richard Estep, everywhere he goes, he plays the scream. But I was at the hospital in Tennessee. Do you know what the name of the
Is it Old South Pittsburgh?
Oh, no, it's Harriman Hospital.
Old Harriman. Yeah.
And
that place.
And I was really not expecting to have an experience there, and I kind of, we were doing like a Christmas type theme where Richard had wrote Christmas cards to the patients, and it was a lovely experience working with him there. But it was also very cold, and some of my aches and pains were kind of kicking in with the arthritis, and so I was kind of, I would say, cranky, because I was just like everything hurts. And then, but we're investigating in the freezing cold up on the fourth floor, and Richard comes around in a hood, and he has it on his recorder, and I scream like a girl, like and Richard has the scream on his recorder, and he plays it everywhere he goes. Or if we're together, he'll play it for.
Richard is so naughty.
I love Richard, and
I love him too. But naughty Richard, shame on you.
And it's funny.
You just illustrated a good point. It's humor, and that kind of leads into a good question. What were some techniques and some thoughts that you learned on how to deal with fear in the moment?
And really, it's who you investigate with too. So it was important for me to be with someone that I trusted, and Richard is definitely somebody I trust. I learned a lot from Richard. In fact, Fueled by Fear was inspired by Richard. He's the one that suggested it right after our visit to the Sally House. He's like, Sam, like you're doing it. You're conquering your fears. Why don't you write a book about it? And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, that's a great idea. So I feel like the biggest lesson learned is definitely to go in with humor, but not to be disrespectful to the spirits. And I think that there's a fine line. You can have fun, but you also have to realize that there's spirit energies there, and your job really is to tell their stories. But when it comes to negative energies, I think it's important to kind of raise your vibration, whether it's through prayer, meditation, or just good old laughter. I think that really does raise your vibration. I do think if you're with a group and there's one person that like provokes or does things that are negative, that could possibly have ramifications, I think that can ruin your experience. And I find that you'll have that one investigator that is an a-hole that does something that ticks off the spirits, and that doesn't go after that person, it goes after me. So you have to be really, it goes after the sensitive. So you have to be really careful who you investigate with. I do a lot of public events, and in fact, when we do the Hanover Tavern, I'm actually going to be part of the investigation. You never know when you're in a public investigation that who's going to be with you, but it's important to, like, as a facilitator, to really stress that you go in, don't provoke, and set some ground rules with your fellow investigators. And I'm a big believer in if you use a spirit board, use it. I would not recommend it on an investigation. I've seen things go awry, but I'm not against spirit boards either. I think that it's what your intentions are. And a lot of times it's also expectations. So if you go in expecting to be attacked, you're going to be attacked. And really check yourself before you head into a location, not to go in with preconceived notions, because it's gonna happen. Whether you go in and you're like, I'm gonna have a wonderful time, be prepared, but also try to go in with positive thoughts that it's going to be a wonderful experience, and really focus on what your mission is. And for me, my mission for pretty much every location I go to is to really focus on the history and making sure that the history is correct. So I like going in, like, as a medium, and to go in and untangle these myths, and then maybe find something that hasn't been found before. And that's something that I'm really passionate about. And a lot of these places, like the Sally House, like Hensdale House, we know a lot of their history, but there's still stuff that's still being found out. And a lot of it is Native American, and there's a lot of Native American backstory that often is overlooked, and really that may be the root of what's really going on. And there may be elemental energies that are there, and that really are protecting the property. And I think that's the case in Hensdale House. I think that's definitely the case at the Conjuring House.
One thing that I do as a historian when I go to work in the museums and everything is, a lot of the museums I work with now are now starting to do land acknowledgements at the beginning of their tours or their interpretations, to say, this on this land where we are today was this tribe, this tribe, this tribe. This is where they lived. This is where they worked and played. And we acknowledge that this was their land first. And we hope to learn more about them so we can add them more into the historical narrative. So.
I think that's extremely important. That, I'll be honest with you, that's a fairly new phenomenon. Like even also, like, in Massachusetts, I worked at the House of Seven Gables. I've given tours at a lot of historical properties, and have worked with historical properties, and we're still finding out the enslaved history at these locations and giving the enslaved people a name. And a lot of, you'll find, like, once you give the spirits a name, they will back off, and they're like, hey, you thank you for acknowledging me. And once you're acknowledged, then it's so I think acknowledgement is really important, and that's definitely the case in Salem. There's been a lot of misinformation about the innocent men and women who were accused of witchcraft in 1692, and I think once you tell their story correctly, they will respond to that. And I think that if I get anything wrong, they'll also respond to that too. I've had situations where, like, on one of my first tours in Salem, was talking about Bridget Bishop, and all the information that we were telling on our tours was, based on Google searches and not necessarily historical research. And I remember like one of my first tours, and this is like a script that I was given, that it was Bridget Bishop's Tavern, which is the Lyceum building, or Turner Seafood.
I remember that.
It's actually not. Yeah, and she's confused with Sarah Bishop, and I think even the magistrates confuse the two as well. So it kind of makes sense. But she's also portrayed as sort of like a hussy, that word like flamboyant clothing and kind of sexy. The thing is, she was sexualized by men, and she was definitely a penny pincher. There is proof that she would go to various houses, like to people that would make her dresses and not pay them. So she also exactly, but that, and she also fought with her husband a lot, and may or may not have killed her husband. So she had an interesting past, but she was not a witch, right. She did what everybody else did. I just think that they did not like her, and they wanted to use her as a cautionary tale. But she challenged the status quo. And if you were a woman and you challenged the status quo in 1692, you're going to be accused of being a witch.
Well, I know for a fact I'd be screwed. I'd be screwed.
And they also accuse men too, and I'd be screwed too. So yeah. It was definitely anyone that challenged status quo, and I definitely do, and you definitely do as well. And I think that that's our purpose, really, Whitney, is to challenge the status quo, and hopefully by doing that, and giving those people a voice as well, we can somehow not change history, but make sure that history is told correctly.
The many different perspectives, which is just super important in every single aspect of life. So last year was the year of fear. And you traveled all around the country this year. I know for a fact you were in so many places. I know you're exhausted. And as an interesting side note, I really do want to do an episode in which we get some of our guests on the show that we've had on the show and actually talk about mental health and the paranormal, because I think we all forget, especially those of us that want to give and give, we forget to set those boundaries for ourselves. So stay tuned on that. But what is this year? What's 2023 and what's 2024 for you, Sam?
Well, so last year was Year of Fear, and then I felt very accomplished last year. This past year, I had 2 books come out. So the Fueled by Fear and Ghost of Conqueror's Colonial Land came out this year. I also traveled, like you said, I traveled all over the country. I've been to some the paranormal conventions that I always wanted to get into. I was able to do this year. So the Michigan Paracon is sort of like the cream of the, like that's the one that everyone wanted to be a part of, and I actually was there for the first time this past year, and I'm really grateful for that opportunity. And I was able to give a lecture with James Anito called. We do a lecture called Monsters of the Paranormal.
Excellent. And it's an excellent presentation. And one of our good friends, Sam Wenham, is an awesome artist, and she provided the illustrations.
Yeah, and Sam and I were so we've done a lot. So we met actually. She was one of the people that I met at it was actually an investigation with Dave Schrader and Chris Fleming, but I met people all over the country. And it's funny, every location I've been to, whether it's, a small event in South Carolina or a big event like Michigan, at least one person from that group has joined our group called Spirit Squad. And Spirit Squad is a group of like-minded individuals who have various forms of gifts, whether it's whether they're empaths or identify as clairvoyants. And we work together as a group, and we find that our gifts are amplified. And I feel like that my mission this past year is really to build Spirit Squad and to find those individuals all over the country who have been part of our family.
And you really have. I mean, the people that I'm with, that I've been with in this particular Spirit Squad group, have ranged from Massachusetts to Georgia to Arizona. So it's a very diverse group with many different beliefs, many different ideas. And I think that's a very important thing. You're building community. This is the year of community. Yeah.
And not knowing what I just knew that I I needed to create a safe space for us. And I felt like that there's so much tumult within the paranormal community that I needed a place for me to go and for my friends to go where we felt safe and where we could kind of do our thing and not be judged. And I think that and we've done that. We successfully have done that, and I'm really proud of us. But we also I think this is probably one of the most respectful, conscientious groups that I've ever worked with. And I think that I think going into we do Spirit Squad field trips in Massachusetts, and you're based in Virginia, so it's a little hard to actually go on the field trips. But I'll tell you, some of those field trips are some of the best investigations that I've ever had, because I feel that we go in and our goal really is to be sensitive to the spirits, but also to go in and really protect ourselves. So we're really going in and going in with good intentions, and we have generally good results from that. Sometimes
I'll get up there at some point.
and I feel like that you are, and it's and I really wanted to. So with Spirit Squad, we do Spirit Squad weekends, and I wanted to do locations that were closer to our Virginia. We have several students in Virginia, and but we also have students in Georgia near Savannah too. So the goal is to kind of take it on the road, if you will, and hopefully make it accessible for everybody. Because I do think, I don't want us to grow too big, but I also want to make sure that we kind of get the right people to join our group. And it's when I say right people, it's generally the ones that are often don't feel like they fit in, into a particular group. So we're kind of like a group of, of sensitive misfits, or in a good way.
Misfit toys.
Yeah.
We really are.
Join us.
We actually have a couple of Spirit Squad members in the chat tonight. There's
Awesome.
Susan Marie is here, and
Yay.
Annie. She's here
Oh,
too.
I love Annie.
Yay. Yeah. And Annie asked, how have I not heard the scream yet? Trust me, Annie, you will.
And Annie, at Mass Paracon, Richard was playing it for everybody, so I'm a little surprised. But he was playing it for like pretty much, but it's so funny that I'm okay with it, because every time I hear it, I snort laugh because it's so funny.
It is a snort laugh inducing thing. I will agree. So this was I definitely think this is a year of community for you. So what's coming up for you in 2024, you think?
So 2024, I am working on. So this past year, I had, I did a show in Canada that, it was called History's Most Haunted. So I would like, if I do more television work, I would like to do something similar to that. What we found with History's Most Haunted is a lot of what was going on in Salem, that the spirits actually they want me back. And I've been staying away from Salem because I really felt I was under attack in Salem. But I also feel that there's more. So I actually started working not in Salem, but right outside of Salem in Beverly, Massachusetts, at this lovely inn on Endicott College, which is it's right out on the shore, the North Shore. It's kind of facing the water. Has an extremely haunted history. It's also, I've been really working on uncovering Witches Woods, which is a legend of a wooded area where the innocent victims from the Salem witch trials hid, to pinpoint exactly where that location is, because I want to investigate it, and and kind of and it turns out, and we believe it's right behind where I work. So
right by Endicott, yeah.
Well,
you were mentioning that earlier, and I think that's pretty exciting. By the way, another thing that one huge misconception I've heard from people about Salem is they think that the Salem we know today is where it all happened. I'm like, actually, there's two Salems. There's Salem Town, and then there's Salem Village, which is now Danvers.
Well, yeah, it's several cities. So Salem Town was actually some innocent people were from Salem Town.
From Salem Town, the nurses.
And so I'm related to the Putnam family, and the Putnams were actually in Danvers. But there was also Topsfield, Peabody, and also Beverly too. Beverly was considered Salem as well. So all these communities, and the the location where the most people were accused actually was Andover,
Yeah,
which wasn't considered Salem, but that's where more people were accused. And my distant cousin Ann Putnam Jr. actually was brought into a church, and she like randomly accused pretty much everybody in Andover of witchcraft. Yeah, so Andover was part of that too. So right, and also there were witch trials in other parts of the country. There's also the Connecticut witch trials. Boston had 3 innocent women who were accused and executed for witchcraft before 1692, and Cotton Mather really played a huge role in that, in those accusations. But Goody Glover to me was the one that I've always identified with and always connected with, and she was the Irish woman who was accused of witchcraft 4 years before the Salem witch trials.
I remember hearing about that case. Yeah, it used to be part of the Lore podcast series, but there was a huge deep dive on the Salem witch trials and all of the different layers and intricacies, and also refugees coming from Maine. From the Maine area, and then also King William's War, King Philip's War.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some stuff that happened up there. There's stuff that happened in that area, but we all deal with stuff. So as Sam mentioned earlier in the podcast, he's going to be joining me in January 2024 at the Hanover Tavern in Hanover, Virginia. Hanover Tavern Paracon. Shenanigans will ensue. There's an amazing lineup. At this point, I've heard that Lourdes and Ron are going to be there, which is going to be exciting. The crew from Ghost Finders are going to be there. There's just going to be so many awesome people that are involved with Hanover Tavern Paracon. And this is my 3rd year in a row doing it.
And the thing is, it hasn't been announced yet, Whitney, so I'm excited. And so we're publicly announcing it for the first time. So you're breaking news here.
We are dropping it. Yes, Tabitha, I hope you can make it to anybody who's able to come on down. Hanover Tavern is a really awesome place. And also, we're both going to be there. So, and also friend of the show, Steve Dills of Transcend Paranormal. So much fun. You've also got, you're starting a new year of ghostwriters. So if any of you are writers and you want to work on your craft, or you're just starting out and you need guidance, come and join us. That's actually how I got involved with the community that Sam has been spending the better part of this year creating. It's a lot of fun. Ghostwriters, when does that start, Sam?
So Ghostwriters is going to start, I think it's January 30th. I'm not sure. Oh, no, it's the second weekend in January for Ghostwriters. And what the goal is this time, so the first round was just sort of giving you the basics. And what's great about it, several of our students from Ghostwriters actually ended up writing books. And, you came in with books under your belt, Whitney. But I do feel like that it inspired the group, I feel like, to push harder and to get published. And I think that you're the first from the group that got published, but we have Angela, who got a book deal out of the blue. She's never written a book
sure
before.
Did.
And she got a book deal. And I'm like, yay, like this is
That's
actually
amazing.
working.
And there's so many other people that are involved with publishing. We've got, you talk about Feminine Macabre with Amanda Woomer. Great resource. So I can't wait to see how we're gonna put it all together this year. You'll also be starting a new installment of the Spirit Squad. So if any of you feel particularly called, come join our crazy community, because we're awesome and everybody is super welcoming. And who knows, you might find a home.
And just we're doing Spirit Squad 5, New Year. That's starting December 26th, and that is for. And if you have not been started from the beginning, it's okay. This really is about setting setting goals for 2024. And also I'm really kind of like superstitious when it comes to New Year's. So I do a lot of candle work, and I do a lot of visualizations of like goals that I want to set for the upcoming year. So we'll talk about that and sort of like things that like vision boards and also divination. So whether it's spirit boards or crystal balls or tarot cards, and to look at different tools you can use to use, tap into your spirit realm, but also it's just tools to help you navigate. And then we're starting from back to the basics, January 30th with Spirit Squad 1. So the goal really is to have people from this past year's Spirit Squad to act as mentors. And that's already kind of happening. A lot of the graduates, if you will, of Spirit Squad are taking a lot of the newbies under their wings and welcoming them into the family. And that's really what I wanted is for the group to be self-sufficient. And I don't really view myself as a leader. I kind of view myself as the facilitator of our community. And, and I feel like that there's a lot of leaders in our group. And I think that, and what I love about it is people step up to kind of showcase their talents within the group. And when we do Spirit Squad Weekend, we have Lisa Crick, who specializes in the Estes method. And we have Danny and Lauren, who have a lot of really cool objects. They're going to be possibly teaching a class on spirit boards. Because I'm not a big spirit board person, but I do know that people within our group they're interested in it, and sort of giving the history and sort of like the do's and don'ts of how to handle spirit boards. So I do feel I bring in experts, people that kind of specialize. And if you like read my books, a lot of my books are that too. Like I really, if I don't know something, I learn from other people. And and I think that's what Spirit Squad is about, is like bringing in the experts who can kind of guide us, and we kind of formulate our own, opinions and approaches to the paranormal, but also maintaining sort of the ethics that hopefully all of us maintain. And they're pretty basic ethics, which is just, don't just be nice and be respectful and really and try your best to have fun, but also go in and protect yourself.
And it's amazing how much people forget. Just be nice.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's the subtitle of this episode. Just be nice. And Sam, so to close out, Sam, where can our Para family find you?
So the best location to reach is sambaltrusis.com. I do have links to pretty much everything, including Spirit Squad and Ghostwriters, and also a list of my upcoming events. But also for books, a lot of my books are in bookstores, but if you're outside of New England, I would recommend going to either Amazon or Barnes and Nobles. For my books, just type in Sam Baltrusis. It's BALTRUSIS. And so it's basically my website, but it'll lead you to other places.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely make sure that's in the show notes. And wow, what a night tonight. So Sam, thank you so much for being on the show. I promise now I owe you big.
Well, I feel like Whitney, really just by being part of the community, like that's what we do for each other. It's like we have both help each other. Yeah. So you don't owe me. We're in this together.
That is so true. And I promise the only thing I'll tell you about Hanover Tavern is they have these grit fritters that are to die for.
All right. I love that already. So you already helped me out.
we will be having some of that. I want to say thank you, chat. We have had Tabitha Meadows just join in, who's a new member of Spirit Squad. How wonderful.
I'm so excited.
And Betsy Kulikowski, again, friend of the show and author extraordinaire. Annie and Susan, thank you for joining us too. This is a great night, guys. So now for the outro. If any of you, thank you all for joining us on the Paraunity Podcast. And if you want to leave us a review or rate us 5 stars, go on out. If you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, that's the best way to do that. We want to hear reviews so that way we can continue to work on making our show better. And at this point, Brandon will say, "That's right, Whitney." I love you.
That's
Brandon.
right, Whitney.
Thank you, Sam. Also, if you listen on, you can catch us on other podcast catchers. If you listen to us on Google, if you listen to us on Spotify, if you listen to us on all the others, heck, you can even say, Alexa, play Paraunity Podcast. That is the coolest thing ever. I'm never going to get over that part. But in any case, if you are interested in, if you know somebody that you think should come on the show, let us know. You can contact us on Facebook or on Instagram. You can also catch us on our YouTube channel, Paraunity Podcast, and enjoy all the crazy hijinks that ensue there. If you like the show, tell a friend. If you go on our website, you can also buy us a cup of coffee. That's very helpful too. But I am Whitney, and on behalf of Brandon, I thank you all for joining us, and thank you for joining us on the place to bring our paranormal family closer together, the Paraunity Podcast. Good night, everybody.
Good night.